let's just jump right into this. You ever get that feeling, just a sneaking suspicion, that someone is effortlessly pulling the strings in your interactions and you're just along for the ride? You agree to things you didn't even want to do, and later you're sitting there scratching your head like, wait, how did that happen? Well, today in this explainer, we're looking at exactly how they do it. We're opening up a literal playbook used by master manipulators moving behind the scenes of our everyday lives. This all comes from R.B. Sparkman's wild, eye-opening book, The Art of Manipulation. Now, Sparkman didn't just theorize about this in some ivory tower. No, back in the 1970s, he actually moved to Houston, Texas, and embedded himself with a ring of incredibly successful con artists. And by the end of this, you're going to know how to spot their tricks a mile away. After spending a solid year deep diving into this gritty underworld of hustlers and shysters, Sparkman came to a pretty chilling realization. He found that only about 5% of people out there are actively manipulating. The other 95%, well, they're the ones being manipulated. That 95%, which, let's be honest, is most of us, just kind of plods along, trusting our natural instincts.
Tactic number 1, spotting the con.
Sparkman lived with this master con artist named Hardy. The guy was an absolute silver-tongued devil. He could talk literally anyone into anything. Picture Hardy leaning in, maybe giving you a reassuring pat on the shoulder, and saying in this incredibly smooth voice, "You'll never regret this. Just as soon as I get the money, I'll see that you're paid back. I've always paid you everything I owed you." Honestly, it sounds comforting, right? It sounds like something a good friend would say. But when you're dealing with that top 5%, you've got to learn how to mentally add subtitles to the video of your life. He is about to steal your money. And yeah, surprise, surprise, Sparkman never saw a dime of that money again. But this actually highlights a fundamental, street-tested rule of human behavior. You know that old Shakespeare line, "Methinks thou doth protest too much"? Yeah, well, it is perfectly true in the world of the con. See, when someone is pulling a fast one on you, their natural instincts actually make them uncomfortable about the lie. So what do? They overcompensate. They get super reassuring, and most importantly, they harp excessively on what you stand to gain. And honestly, it makes total sense when you break it down. If a deal is genuinely a slam dunk for you, the facts are going to speak for themselves. A truly trustworthy person operates with this calm, take it or leave it kind of vibe. The absolute second someone starts patting you on the back, constantly reminding you how rich you're going to be, yeah, they're just softening you up to put the knife in. Moving on to tactic 2, the power of unpredictability. Okay, there's this famous, honestly kind of mind-blowing psychology experiment with pigeons that perfectly mirrors human relationships. In the experiment, they gave a pigeon a food pellet every single time it pecked a bar. Eventually, the pigeon just got bored and stopped pecking. But, and here's the kicker, when the food was given intermittently, just randomly and unpredictably, the pigeons started pecking that bar frantically. Sparkman realized that humans really aren't any different. If you treat someone wonderfully all the time, human nature kicks in and they just start taking you for granted. But if you alternate between the caress and the bite, treating them like absolute royalty 1 minute and completely ignoring them the next, you create this puppet-like control. They become obsessed. They get desperate to win back that positive reinforcement. People want what they can't have. Master manipulators exploit this vulnerability relentlessly. They make you think they're this elusive prize you can't quite grasp. Whether it's a romantic partner playing hot and cold, or a business associate suddenly acting totally disinterested in a huge deal, they are weaponizing unpredictability. They're making your own instincts work against you. Which brings us to tactic 3, the walk-away power. So it turns out your personal life entirely dictates your bargaining power. In the business world, your nut is your overhead. It's your rent, your car payments, all those fixed expenses you absolutely have to pay just to survive the month. Most people walk into a negotiation reeking of desperation because their nut is massive. They've got this heavy millstone around their neck, and trust me, the other party can smell that desperation a mile away. So what's the master manipulator move? You keep your nut extremely small. If you don't actually need the money right this second, your entire demeanor shifts. You naturally radiate confidence, you radiate independence, because the person who can afford to just casually walk away from a deal, they're almost always the one who ends up getting exactly what they want. And the absolute sharpest weapon of this "I don't need you" attitude is the power of silence. Sparkman shares this brilliant, frankly brutal tactic for dealing with someone who's acting condescending or dismissive. The exact second you detect that attitude, you ask them a direct question, and then you just shut up completely, even if it results in a 10-minute, agonizingly awkward silence. Do not say another word until they answer.
By sitting there in absolute silence, you're implicitly telling them, look, I don't need you, and I certainly don't need to put up with your rudeness. It immediately forces their hand and snaps control of the dynamic right back to you.
All right, let's look at tactic 4, the weapon of meekness.
You'd think being the smartest person in the room is a power move, right? Actually, no. The know-it-all routine is essentially brandishing a shiny, sharp hook right in your target's face. When you act super clever, people instantly expect to be tricked. Their walls go up immediately. But a master manipulator, they play dumb. They completely embrace meekness. See, if you come across as a bit of a greenhorn, people lower their guard. They'll even voluntarily hand over valuable information just to help you out. Meekness is literally the perfect camouflage. It hides the hook of manipulation while letting you safely siphon off all the best ideas from everyone else in the room.
Let's hit tactic 5, reading real motives.
Hustlers rely heavily on what's known as the 3-second tactic to completely bypass polite social excuses. Here's exactly how it works. When you ask someone a direct, surprising question, something that really catches them off guard, their true, unfiltered emotion will flash across their face, but it only lasts for about 3 seconds. In that tiny, vulnerable 3-second window, do not look at their mouth. Look squarely at their eyes and their upper cheekbones. That is where the naked emotion is mirrored with absolute, stark clarity. After those 3 seconds, their composure returns, the fake smile gets plastered back on, and their mask is secure. But if you manage to catch that brief window, you've completely pierced their social armor.
And finally, we arrive at the turn, the ultimate cost. There is a quote in this book that will literally stop you in your tracks. Listen to this. I suspect that all of these manipulators will die friendless, and I predict that each of them will be the only person in attendance at his own funeral. Wow. Just let the weight of that sink in for a second. See, Sparkman didn't put this explainer together to glorify these guys. He saw firsthand the absolute wasteland they created in their own personal lives. Every single one of the so-called masters he learned from was divorced, completely isolated, and profoundly unhappy. And this brings us to a really deep paradox about human nature. You might be sitting there thinking, hey, I'm smart, I'll just selectively manipulate strangers to get ahead in business, but I'll still be a great friend and a loving partner. Yeah, it doesn't work that way. Human behavior just doesn't compartmentalize that neatly. If you train your brain to view people merely as resources to be exploited, if you start using these tactics selfishly, that behavior is absolutely going to bleed into every single relationship you have. You'll end up treating your closest friends the exact same way you treat your enemies. And the inevitable tragic result of stabbing your friends in the back? Absolute miserable isolation. Which leaves us with one final, absolutely vital question. The tools we've unpacked today, spotting that protesting too much tell, recognizing intermittent reinforcement, maintaining the power to just walk away, and reading people's real motives, these are incredibly powerful concepts. They're a lot like martial arts. They can be used to destroy, or they can be used purely for defense. So now that you've seen the hidden strings moving behind the scenes, now that you know how to add subtitles to the 5% who are constantly trying to pull those strings, what are you going to do? Are you going to let this knowledge isolate you, or are you going to use this streetwise playbook to navigate the world safely, protect your boundaries, and step firmly out of that manipulated 95%? The choice is entirely up to you. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and hey, stay sharp out there.